I want to talk to you about Akka Mahadevi, the flame of naked devotion, and the mystical love language of the divine. You see, there was a divine rebel in a world that was very conformist. If you look to the annals of Indian spiritual history, few women shine as luminously and as defiantly as Akka Mahadevi, the 12th century mystic, poet, and saint of the Lingayat, or the Virashaiva tradition in Karnataka. In a society tightly bound by caste, gender norms, and religious orthodoxy, Akka Mahadevi dared to follow a path few would even imagine. She renounced the world, its constraints, and even her clothes, choosing instead to be cloaked in her untamed hair and divine devotion. Her life was a living poem, her body a temple of rebellion, and her soul an eternal flame dancing for her beloved Lord Chennamallikarjuna, the White Jasmine Lord. Her story is not just one of quiet contemplation within the margins of acceptable theology. It's one of radical renunciation, ecstatic poetry, fierce independence, and transcendent love. You see, Akka Mahadevi's voice rises from history as both a spiritual beacon and a challenge. Can one truly love God without giving up everything? Her answer was an unequivocal yes, and she lived that truth until her last breath. Let's put her in historical context. Lingayatism and the Bhakti reform. The 12th century in southern India was a time of intense religious ferment as well as philosophical upheaval. The dominant Brahmanical traditions, with their rigid caste system and their patriarchal structures, were being challenged by a growing wave of bhakti, devotional movements that emphasized direct personal experience of the divine over ritualistic priestly intercession or birth based entitlement. In Lingayatism, which was founded by Basavana, it was a prominent such movement in Karnataka. It emphasized monotheistic devotion to Lord Shiva in the form of linga, the social equality and rejection of caste, idolatry, and elaborate rituals. The movement welcomed women and lower castes who were providing a spiritual refuge to those marginalized by mainstream Hinduism. Akka Mahadevi emerged within this context as both a prophetess and a poet whose visionary intensity and spiritual absolutism elevated her above sectarian boundaries. Though a follower of the Lingayat tradition, her mysticism transcended doctrine altogether as well as gender and even form itself. What was the power of her renunciation? Well, her devotion had a very strong naked truth to it. And so one of the most striking aspects of Akka Mahadevi is her choice to abandon clothing, walking around naked through towns and forests. To many, this act appeared as if she was mad or had some sort of lunacy, and it was scandalous, it was a threat. But for Akka Mahadevi, it was an expression of absolute spiritual authenticity. She argued that if the body itself is temporary and impure, why glorify it with silk and gold? If the soul is in communion with God, why should one cater to the expectations of the world? When asked about her nudity, she reportedly said, would a child suckled at the breast of a mother feel shame if naked in her presence? Her body was a vehicle, but was not the destination. Her true adornment was divine consciousness. Her true garment was the grace of Chennamallikarjuna, and the true audience was the divine itself. This extreme renunciation mirrors the actions of other mystics across other traditions. Francis of Assisi discarding his clothes before the bishop, or Sufi ascetics wandering the deserts. But Akka Mahadevi's gesture was particularly potent as a woman, defying not only materialism but patriarchal control over female bodies. At the heart of her faith is Chenna Mallikarjuna, the beloved divine. And so her poetry was all about her all consuming love for Chenna Mallikarjuna, which is literally the Lord white as jasmine. He's not a distant metaphysical construct, but in her mind, a living, breathing lover, her soulmate, her husband, her eternal companion. Her poems, her Vachanas, are suffused with the language of Viraha, which is separation, and Shringara, which is divine eroticism, echoing the love mysticism of Radha for Krishna or Andel for Lord Vishnu. He bartered my heart, looted my body, took my mind, and played with it. He drank my thoughts and set me ablaze. Akka Mahadevi saw herself as a bride of Shiva, married not in a earthly ceremony, but in the sacred union of yogic ecstasy and poetic surrender. This marriage was not symbolic in her mind; it was literal. She rejected mortal suitors, royal proposals, and societal definitions of femininity to embrace a spiritual monogamy with the absolute. Her love was not sentimental; it was fierce. In many poems, she addresses the pain of separation, the torment of longing, and the rapture of union, echoing the ancient tantric understanding that divine union is both erotic and transcendent. In her poetry, there were many themes: the fire of love, of freedom. You see, Akka Mahadevi's Vachanas are written in Canada, and they burst with raw spiritual emotion. Despite being composed in the 12th century, they retain a contemporary intensity to them, grappling with themes that are still resonating today: the idea of freedom, the idea of identity, the idea of body politics, of love and surrender. Her body was viewed in her point of view as a veil. She often spoke of the body as an illusion, a garment that hides the soul's true face. The body is both a prison and a gift, but only if consecrated in love. My mind is my temple, my body is the shrine. I wear my nudity like a sacred ash. In terms of feminine autonomy, Akka Mahadevi was fiercely independent, asserting her right to divine intimacy. She did not seek permission from fathers, husbands, or priests. Her poetry boldly claimed a direct, unmediated relationship with the divine. Men, their laws, their customs, I do not follow them, I do not fear them. My Lord is not chained to their rules. And so her language was one of burning, of fire being a recurring image in her poetry, the fire of longing, of purification and divine energy. Her inner flame was her teacher and guide. What use are eyes that don't burn in love for him who gave them? Thus, she spoke often in tones of erotic mysticism. Her poems are deeply erotic, not in a vulgar sense, not in a crude sense, but in the sense of the soul's longing for union with the divine. She uses the language of lovers to describe spiritual experience, blurring the boundaries between mysticism and sensuality. Her love language was total surrender. In modern terms, we often talk about love languages, ways that people give and receive love. Well, Akka Mahadevi's love language was radical surrender, not just of material things, but of ego, form, and societal identity, a sort of non attachment. She gave God her voice through poetry and song, her body through naked asceticism, her mind through constant contemplation, her heart through intense devotional ecstasy. Every word she spoke, every step she took was directed towards her beloved. This surrender was not passive, it was empowered, it was conscious, and it was deeply rebellious. Akka Mahadevi redefined what it meant to love God, not as obedience or appeasement, but as a passionate commitment that challenges the status quo. Confronting patriarchy in society, Akka Mahadevi's life was an embodied protest against a society that confined women to kitchens, homes, and silence. She debated male scholars, she challenged priests and kings, and she walked into temples that excluded women. In one particular account, a Jain monk ridiculed her poetry, calling it childish sentiment. She responded with a poem so piercing that the monk reportedly broke into tears and prostrated at her feet. This was not feminism in the modern political sense, but this was a form of spiritual feminism, a reclaiming of divine authority, autonomy, and a voice by a woman who refused to be silenced and who refused to be talked to in a condescending way. Her legacy and influence thus have continued on well after her passing. Akka Mahadevi remains one of the most earliest recorded female poets in all of Indian history. Her works are still taught in literature courses, they're recited in spiritual gatherings, and studied by scholars across the world. Some of her impacts include inspirations for women's spirituality. She has inspired countless women seeking to reconcile their spirituality with independence and creativity. Her literary contribution, her Vachanas, are considered masterpieces of medieval Canada literature. Her social critique, her life being a mirror to social norms, forcing reflection on how we treat female bodies, how we treat mystics and seekers. she became a symbol for courage. She stood as an icon for truth tellers, spiritual rebels, and poetic mystics across traditions. Death or liberation, the disappearing into silence. Towards the end of her life, Akka Mahadevi is said to have withdrawn into the forests and the caves, where she eventually disappeared. Some say she merged into the divine light, leaving no body behind. Others say she simply walked away from the world that she had already transcended. What remains is not a tomb, but a trail of divine fire, and it was lit and raging by her words. In conclusion, Akka Mahadevi's eternal relevance lasts even to this day because we're in a world grappling with gender inequality as well as material obsession and sometimes spiritual confusion as well as social conformity. So Akka Mahadevi's voice comes like a sword of light. She teaches us that true love requires nothing short of everything, and that divinity is not hidden in rituals or robes, but found in the naked, burning heart of one who dares to love God without any compromise. Her poems are not relics, they are alive, they're breathing, they're provocative, they're being studied by students all across India. They are reminders that the soul longs for something greater, and that when we strip away the expectations of the world, what remains is not shame, but true freedom. To read Akka Mahadevi is to walk with her, barefoot, fierce, and free, into the divine forest where love is the only law and surrender is the only language. And if I don't see you, just remember, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.